young Jai Martinkovits is not speaking, it's the elderly David Flint. And I was absolutely delighted to hear the young men give their superb presentation. And the most intriguing one, or the most forceful one, was, of course, when they asked, well, have the Republicans presented any reasons to you, any arguments to you to change the constitutional system? And one clever young man said, not really, not really. I think we'll cut that and put that in the beginning of the video as the theme of Wagga Wagga. Thank you for having us in this wonderful city. It is so nice to come here again. I've been here several times and enjoy it so much each time. Joe and I are going to do a presentation on where we are, where we've been and where we're going. I'm reminded, though, at this stage of the development of the support for the constitutional monarchy, I'm reminded on one occasion in a restaurant, a tea house in Norfolk some years ago, when some ladies were having tea and cake and other ladies were there, and one lady was seen leaving with her cake, and one of the ladies sitting down said, "Excuse me, but I must say you look awfully like the Queen." To which the Queen replied, "How reassuring." And seeing you here today, seeing this wonderful assembly in this superb city, I can only think how very reassuring. And I'll hand over to Jai, who'll begin.
Do you want to swap sides? Because there's cables that you might trip on them or something. Well, good morning again, everybody. I just wanted to have a quick show of hands from curiosity. How many people are from the wonderful city of Wagga? So we've got a wonderful representation from the local city and from Gumley Gumley. How many people have come across from Sydney? Thank you very much. How many have we got from Melbourne? Oh, that's very good too. Thank you. And do we have anybody who's ventured from South Australia or from Western Australia, or indeed any of the territories? ACT? ACT, we got 1, 2, 3, 4. Wonderful. And excellent. Well, thank you all very much. We'll just have a quick look and reminder, and from Toowoomba, of course, Dallas Kelly, thank you. Thank you for making the trip across. We'll just refresh ourselves about what it is that ACM exists for, and I'm sure that everybody in this room will be very well aware that we exist to preserve, to protect, and to defend our heritage, which includes several aspects. We're very interested primarily in our Australian constitutional system. And of course, with that comes the role of the Crown within that system, and that is one of the primary focuses, of course, of ACM. We also strongly support and we believe that the two issues are strongly tied together. And of course, the Republicans once wished to change our flag, and of course, we believe they still do, but they know that it has such popular support that it would be in to their ultimate detriment to say anything to the contrary. So we are strongly defending our flag. ACM was first formed in 1992, and our charter was written at that time and signed at Town Hall. It was drafted by Michael Kirby. Of course, there's a picture which Lloyd will probably immediately recognise from 1996 at the Governor to Government House rally, which I'm sure many people here were present at. As I said, Michael Kirby, who drafted the ACM Charter. We have our first Executive Director, Tony Abbott, our second Executive Director, Kerry Jones, and this presentation doesn't have Thomas Flynn actually, we need to update that. Thomas Flynn and then subsequently myself. I'll pass over to David, who's going to talk a little about Return the Governor. I must apologise that there's little video that's embedded here, and we have a few throughout the presentation, but unfortunately the sound facility on the PA system here isn't working with the computer.
I've got this. You can stay. If you do a presentation with a young person, there's a chance that other people might think that you're young too. Well, back to Return the Governor, you're seeing scenes from a video recently found of the time, which we're putting onto YouTube. We're going to release it on YouTube when the Governor actually returns to Government House. She's in the chalet within the grounds, and Government House is supposed to be being set up so that she can actually have a suite within Government House. But in 1996, as you know, and you'll find from this video, which is from the ABC, they say 10,000 people were in the street. Well, as Lloyd reminded me, and Lloyd is here today, welcome, Lloyd. Our wonderful first national convener told me that when he stood on the platform, which I think was the back of a truck, you saw people right up to Hyde Park and as far as you could see down Macquarie Street. There must have been over 20,000 people there. And this has been the most splendid demonstration of support for constitutional monarchy. The Republicans have tried to hold public demonstrations, and the most they've got is, I think at Parramatta they got 70 people. In 1998, the big feature for us was the Constitutional Convention, where you won over 72% of the constitutional monarchist vote. Lloyd was there, Lloyd led us there, and he formed a united front with all of the monarchist groups. There were 4 other small monarchist groups, and this contrasted very much with the Republicans. The Republicans immediately divided and fought among themselves. The constitutional monarchists immediately saw eye to eye and voted the same way on almost every motion. The point, and it contrasts with what Malcolm Turnbull said the other day. He said we behaved with deceit. We deceitfully promised a second referendum, of which there is no record. The behaviour of the constitutional monarchists there was best described by Cardinal Pell, who, you might recall, was persuaded by Malcolm Turnbull to move the motion for the approval of the form of Republican government which was to go to the referendum. He said that the constitutional monarchists acted with discipline, integrity and honour. And what more can you say than that? And I think Malcolm Turnbull really needs to go and check his history. We then had the vote. We had the referendum in the following year, and Lloyd went to the family court, and somehow I emerged as national convener. I'm not entirely sure how. Lloyd tells me that the way he emerged as national convener was that when all of the people on the original council were together and they called for volunteers to become national convener, all the others took one step back, which left Lloyd there. I hope I'm not embarrassing you, Lloyd. Well, ACM managed to get over 55,000 people out as supporters across the country. You might remember that Kerry set up offices in every state. We had a director in every state. We also had coordinators in every electorate, and that worked very well. It resulted in a landslide. We won nationally. We won in every state, that is 100% of the states, and we won in 72% of electorates, which demonstrated that the Republicans were concentrated as an elite in inner city elite electorates across the country. And Malcolm says it's close. It was a landslide. If that were copied in an election, if you had 72% of electorates in an election for the government, it would have been the biggest landslide this country has ever seen.
We thought that we would share a few anecdotes with you as to how it is that we became involved with ACM, and I'm sure that a few people in the room will have heard the story of how I became involved with ACM before, but I'll entreat the rest of you who haven't heard this story yet. ACM's first executive director asked me the same question. Tony said, well, Jai, mate, how did you get involved with ACM? And I think it's a fairly reasonable question, considering that my background in training is actually in IT, and I suppose that ACM tends to attract lawyers and others who may consider constitutional issues more than those working in IT. But it was all due to this woman, Captain Teresa. And Captain Teresa was the attractive secretary of ACM, and I was, of course, dating Teresa and wanting to impress her. I said, well, I better show up at a few of these work dues. And I came along, and of course from that flowed an interest which has blossomed into a wonderful issue that I feel very passionately about, and of course are involved with on a very significant basis. And of course subsequently we got married, and it was a wonderful story that with a wonderful ending.
Mine, I'm afraid, is not as romantic. I am unashamedly a royalist. Not all members of ACM are royalists, but I have a great respect for the throne, but also for the Queen and members of the royal family, for the Queen and her father and mother and her grandfather and grandmother, right back to Queen Victoria. But in addition to that, I've twice, I can recall, twice having sworn the oath of allegiance. Once as a lawyer, and secondly when I was put into the army. And I feel that if you put your hand on the Bible and you swear an oath of allegiance, you swear any oath, you're under a duty not to break that oath. There may be extreme circumstances when an oath can be broken, but I don't think one can easily break an oath, and I am horrified by members of Parliament who quite readily swear the oath of allegiance to the sovereign and then turn round and undermine her, not only in relation to moving for a referendum, but do it in a snide way by creeping republicanism. And it is shocking, I think. But more importantly, it's about the indispensable office, which is at the heart of our constitutional system. The Crown is part of the legislature. It's the formal executive where it plays a significant role. It's the fount of justice, the fount of honour. The Crown provides the head of state through the Governor-General. The Crown is the command-in-chief which ensures that our Army, Navy and Air Force owe their loyalty to something above the government of the day. It's the independent employer of the public service. It's the federal linchpin with the High Court, the only institution which transcends the states and the Commonwealth. It's the constitutional guardian, as we have seen on those occasions when there's great pressure on the political system, as in 1975. It is in the personal union among the realms, and it's also the head of the Commonwealth. It's an extraordinary institution. The idea that you can replace this institution, which is above politics, with a political office, that is, someone elected, or with someone who, as in 1999, was to be a puppet of the Prime Minister, is unacceptable. Remember, in 1999, and I don't think the Republicans should ever be allowed to forget it, and Philip Gibson never allows them to forget it, it was to have been the only republic in the world in which the Prime Minister would find it easier to sack the President than his driver. The President could be sacked without notice, without grounds, and without any appeal. And who would want to increase the already vast powers of the Prime Minister and the Cabinet? It was a shocking model, and many have admitted it since, and many admitted it before, but then denied it when they campaigned for the referendum.
Well, in this epic journey that we're taking you on here, of course we're still dwelling on what is it that's ACM's history, how is it that we became personally involved. We want to take you to a couple of the things that have been the highlights over the past 12 months and just a little beyond, and what are the significant achievements that ACM has managed to secure during that period of time. And of course, then we're going to talk to you a little about the future, and I'll hold back on the wonderful special treat that we have for you until we get to that at the end. So in 2010, of course, we had a royal visit from Prince William, and there was a barbecue that the Premier had organised, and you can see a nice photo there, which ACM was very fortunate to have been invited to, and I had the opportunity to meet the Prince, which was a privilege and an honour. And I would point out that although I'm sure that he talked to a lot of people, he did seem interested in what ACM was doing, and I feel that he was reserved in expressing opinion about that, as is properly the case, but you could tell that it was sort of very much at the forefront of his attention. So be encouraged that the Royals, I believe, do take a significant interest in the Republic debate in Australia, but also in the role that ACM is playing in that debate. The royal wedding, David?
Then, of course, there was the royal wedding, which was discounted by many Republicans. The Republicans announced, the Australian Republican movement announced that we would, or they would be reviving the campaign, reviving the Republican campaign to coincide with the royal wedding, which was a stupid proposition, and of course, which they quickly abandoned. Of course, it was a great success, and it was very well attended, particularly in the television audiences in this country, which were a record. Thank you. Now you.
We then had Her Majesty visit Australia in 2011, and that was a significant occasion. I'm sure you'll all remember the television footage with those amazing scenes, particularly in Perth, with that barbecue on the foreshore. But also there was a significant turnout in Brisbane. And you could just see that literally as far as the eye could see, even with the aerial shots, it was well in excess of, I believe, 100,000, was it not?
Yes.
Well in excess of 120,000. So a significant turnout. Of course, the Republicans were hyping up, saying, well, this is going to be the Queen's last visit to Australia, and they attribute it to that. But that's certainly not the case, and we certainly should not assume that that is Her Majesty's last visit. In fact, I would expect that it's not. Would be, if I had to put a wager on it, that's where I'd be putting my money.
One of the things which we have concentrated on, and I must say I've learned a lot from, is opinion polling. Opinion polling is not something which should depend on just one poll. When you're looking at opinion polls, you really have to compare them across different opinion polls and over time. And there is no doubt that some matters do appear. And one is that in this area, the opinion polls, the good opinion polls, the reliable opinion polls, overstate support for a republic. The crucial consideration when you look at the opinion polls is support for a republic. Ignore the others, ignore the undecided, because experience shows that the undecided tend to vote with us. They tend to vote no. The crucial question is, what is support for a republic? And in 1999, Morgan, which I think has probably proved to be the most reliable, was overestimating support. The support for a republic in 1999 was 54, and as you know, the actual vote was a little over 45. So they've overestimated it by 10%. And then you'll see that the trend line goes up for a short time, and then it falls. It falls down to the 40s, and then it falls even lower. Just before the Queen's visit, we decided that we had to answer the position concerning opinion polls, because at the time of the 10th anniversary of the referendum in 2009, the Republicans managed to produce a poll from UMR. It used to be University of Melbourne Research. It's been spun off and it's independent. It's the polling company which the Labor Party has been using nationally for about 10 years. UMR in 2009, when Morgan was showing something down in the 40s, UMR, in that area, UMR produced a poll which showed support for a republic had spiked to 59%. And the media foolishly accepted that without proper investigation, because if it had been compared with the others, you'd have to say, well, why is this about 14 points above? But it went round the world, and it was said that Australia, on the 10th anniversary of the referendum, was ripe and ready for a republic. Well, when you looked at the UMR figures, and you'll find them on our website, you'll realise that they're always above Morgan, and something is wrong. You'll also see from our latest report that they gave a polling in advance of the Northern Territory elections where they predicted a narrow Labor victory, and as you know, it was a landslide in favour of the coalition. So UMR, I'm sure, is a very responsible polling company, but they're not as reliable as Morgan is. What we decided before the Queen's visit was that we wouldn't have this happen again. We wouldn't have the Queen's visit surrounded by some bogus, well, I shouldn't say bogus poll, by some questionable poll. We wanted a good, sound poll which would produce the figures which would demonstrate that Australians wanted to keep the monarchy. So we asked Morgan Polling to do two things. We didn't have to pay for it, fortunately, but we asked them to do two things. Firstly, do a survey over time, which that is a summary of it, but also to do a poll for the royal visit. They did a poll for the royal visit, and it showed, this was before the royal visit, that support for a republic was crashing and it had fallen to 34%. I have no doubt that since the royal visit and since developments after that, that it's probably fallen further. And I have no doubt also that that is the view of the Republican politicians, because I think we have almost proof positive of that. One of the strongest Republicans in the Parliament was Bob Brown, the former leader of the Greens Party. He regularly introduced legislation for a plebiscite. He set up inquiries for change to a republic. As you know, in 2010, in the negotiations to form the present government, Dr. Brown could have had anything. He extracted from the Prime Minister a reversion of her position in the election campaign on the carbon dioxide tax. This is not a political movement, that is not a political statement, it is a statement of fact. He could have had anything from the Prime Minister. He could have easily had he wanted it, a referendum or a plebiscite. Why didn't he ask for one? He didn't ask for one because of this sort of poll, which they're also doing. The political parties also do their own polls, and that would have confirmed that support for a republic was crashing, that it was below the 30s, going perhaps even into the 20s. It would have shown to them that had they held a plebiscite, had they held a referendum, it would have been defeated massively. It would have set back the cause of republicanism for a long time, and anybody who had pushed for such a thing would have gathered great opprobrium from the people who would have said, and perhaps the media would have then eventually come out and said this, why are they wasting their time on something the people don't want? So I think we can be very reassured about the state of support at the present time. If you want to read more about this, it's on our website. There's a separate area which is dedicated to opinion polling. What it does show also a very interesting phenomenon, and it occurred at the time of the referendum and before, and that is that if you break people up into age groups, young, old, and middle-aged, the stronger support for a republic seems to rise among the middle-aged, particularly those in the inner city. There's weak support among the elderly. The interesting thing is that support for a republic is also lower among the young. And this has come out consistently, and it came out in the latest Morgan poll. So I think we have a lot of reassurance. Remember the Queen said, how very reassuring? I think with the polling, we can also say, how very reassuring.
Well, this wonderful logo that you see here which is an interesting logo, but when you realise how it was produced, you'll understand why it is as it is. It is the official logo of Her Majesty's Diamond Jubilee. And of course you can see that we have the diamonds down the side, we have the flag here, the UK flag of course. We have 60 at the top being the 60th year of Her Majesty's reign, and we have Diamond Jubilee with the letters emphasised here. Now the way this was produced was a national competition in the UK, and it was for children aged between 6 and 14. Now the particular student who won this competition was 10 years old, and I think that for the symbolism that he's built into that logo, and it's very sweet that it was produced in this manner, it's a very sweet logo. That was Catherine Duar, and she of course was from Chester.
One of the matters in relation to the Diamond Jubilee is not as happy as the production of that logo. Just before the central events of the Diamond Jubilee, that is the pageant, the river pageant, the service at St. Paul's, the balcony appearance and the fly past, just before that, I was looking for the program in the newspaper, because we wanted to put up on the site information to supporters as to where to watch all of these events. And I was surprised that when I looked at the time of the river pageant on ABC One, now remember ABC One is a station which is accessible to the whole nation. It's not digital, not everybody has digital. ABC One is crucial for this sort of national event, because everybody can see it, it's put on at the same time, and it's widely accessible. But I couldn't find it on ABC One. Instead, I found a 1975 film with Warren Beatty, Shampoo, an American comedy. I thought, there must be some mistake. So I phoned the ABC and asked, well, what's this? And the lady said, well, yes, that is the program. I said, well, what about the Diamond Jubilee? And she said, oh, it'll be on ABC 24, which is the digital channel. I said, but what will be on ABC 24? And she said, oh, we won't be actually showing the events, but it's the news channel, so we'll be crossing to reporters in London from time to talk about these and show glimpses of them. I said, well, that's not very satisfactory for the national broadcaster. And she said, just a moment. She put me onto a message bank, and the message bank allowed me to record my complaint. So I phoned the managing director's office, Mark Scott, and tried to speak to his secretary. All I could get was a message bank, so I left a similar message there. And I soon realised they weren't going to budge. They were going to put me off, and they would go ahead and create this travesty which would stop Australians from seeing this. Because the only other station which was going to show this was APAC, who are very graciously filming this. APAC is the public arm of Sky News, and it's a channel which is on Foxtel and Austar, but you can also see it on your computers. You don't need a subscription to actually see it. So a number of people could see it, but there are a large number of people who don't watch television on their computers, and a large number of people who don't subscribe to pay television. So there would be a large number of people not being able to see the events. So we decided that we had to play tough. We decided very quickly on a media campaign, and we got it into one of the Fairfax Sunday newspapers, into the Sun Herald, a big story in the Sun Herald. We got it, we decided to set up a petition online. We couldn't have a print version petition because it wouldn't have, by the time we'd posted it out, it would have been already broadcast. This was only the week before the Diamond Jubilee. So we had an online petition, and we did a lot of talkback, and we put a lot of pressure on the ABC, and within 3 days, the ABC defence collapsed, and they changed their position, and suggested they were going to do it all along. They were just in negotiations with the BBC. Well, anyway, they put it on. Now, we're not satisfied with that. We're very satisfied that they put it on. We've got an FOI application, Freedom of Information application, with the ABC to get all the information so we could see what were their negotiations with the BBC. Did they really, as they claimed, had they really always intended to broadcast it, or did they suddenly rush it through, as I suspect they did? And what they've said is, well, there's a provision in the Freedom of Information Act which excludes program material. And this is program material, which is obviously not so. So we're seeking a review on that. And we've also put in a Freedom of Information application with the BBC. And the BBC may be inclined to there may be a problem with the BBC because I suspect that the BBC may have done it through their commercial arm, BBC Worldwide. But there may be, we will then, as Jai suggests, we'll then perhaps be able to ask for a Freedom of Information application on BBC negotiations with BBC Worldwide to transmit the feed to Australia. So there will be ways we will do this. But if the ABC, it is outrageous, absolutely outrageous, that the ABC doesn't do its duty as the national broadcaster to broadcast national events. For years we've been saying they should broadcast the events in London which relate to the monarchy. They should in particular broadcast the Queen's birthday parade in London, the Trooping the Colour. That should be shown in Australia. It's shown on German television. And if the Germans can see it, why can't the Australians? And, but more importantly, the ABC rightly insists on transparency, openness from all other organisations in the country. The ABC should equally be transparent about what they did in relation to this so we can see whether they are performing their duty in relation to national events. And we will pursue this. And if they refuse and they are able to hide the files from us, then we will ask the government. It may not be the same government. There may be another government in power then. We will ask the government to change the legislation under the FOI Act to specifically provide that non-program material be available under the FOI Act. So that was one of our struggles of the year. But it resulted in a very pleasant conclusion.
While we're on the topic of the Diamond Jubilee, moving back to a more happy note, you'll see here a video which is called Sing. It was the official song that was produced for the Diamond Jubilee, and I'm sorry that we can't play a little for you. You can see a little of the audio there. But this video, which was commissioned, features several of the countries from across the Commonwealth, and you can see here these beautiful scenes from across the Commonwealth, which are incorporated into the video with the beautiful voices from across the Commonwealth. But the particular video was, the score was written by Andrew Lloyd Webber and Gary Barlow, who was involved very much in the filming of it. There were musicians and singers from all the way across the Commonwealth, but I wanted to highlight a few of the Australian aspects of this video that were produced. There was Jeffrey Gurumulu, Yupingu, who's the Indigenous Australian singer that's been blind from birth. And I'm sure that you've seen him. He's been in a lot of shows, and he has a lot of albums and things like that, and a wonderful Australian. He was in that video, featured very significantly. The Australian Federal Police Pipes and Drums were in that video, and also the Sydney Symphony Orchestra. So there's a lot of unique Australian aspects there which are showcased to the world, and I think it's a wonderful song, so I encourage you to have a look at it when you get to a computer or something like that where you have sound available. What ACM has been doing, and of course David was highlighting to you that when something like this comes up, we have to be very much at the forefront and ready to defend. Now, the ABC is only one instance of such campaigns that are required. ACM noticed that, and this would have been a couple of months ago, and I'm sure that you saw this in the headlines, that the Girl Guides movement in Australia had decided to remove two references, one of which was particularly of interest to ACM, and the other would have been of interest to many people in ACM. What they were suggesting to remove was to remove any references, firstly, to God from their promise and their oath of allegiance, but secondly, they were removing any reference to the Queen and to the Crown. And we, of course, immediately saw that this was another example of creeping republicanism, where, of course, if you remove the symbols of the Crown, and to give you another example of this happening, would be in Parliament House in New South Wales, where there was a beautiful portrait in the foyer area, which was rather large and immediately obvious. It was moved to a hallway in one of the members-only areas. And when we inquired as to why this had been moved, we were told that it was being damaged by the light. Now, of course, if you've ever been to New South Wales Parliament House, you'll immediately know that the lighting in that foyer area is extremely dimly lit, and I would suggest probably very similarly lit to where they moved it to. It was obviously to remove it from public view. Of course, since the O'Farrell government came into power a few years ago, there have been moves to restore some of the symbolism of the Crown. And of course, we see that the portraits of Her Majesty and the Duke have been restored into the dining room in Parliament House, but that large portrait still remains to be returned. And of course, Her Excellency is still yet to move into Government House itself, but there have been moves to restore that. Equally, we were disturbed by this. So we immediately mounted a talkback campaign, and we very quickly responded in the media. There was a lot of media attention around this issue, and we put out very strong statements. Unfortunately, you can't see the video here, or you can see the video, but you can't see or hear the audio. What's happening is the students here firstly recite their existing or previous promise. They then have the guide leader instructing the hapless girl to remove the portrait here, and you can see it being carried out the back through this door here to some unsightly end, no doubt. It was a disgusting video that was produced. We then see them swearing a new oath, which I mean, in my personal opinion, I think is a very wishy-washy, self-centered oath, as where before the scouting movement and the Girl Guides movement has always been about helping others, my external duty, what can I do for my community? Well, this is now about, being true to myself and true to my beliefs, and it's just completely changed the onus. So we very quickly responded. We're still continuing that campaign. I had an opinion piece in the Telegraph, which was widely read. I received a lot of support for that, but we're still to see the conclusion to that campaign. But you can see from this that ACM has a very significant role to play. We are still very much in campaign mode, although there's no immediate threat, and as Professor Flint was sharing with regards to opinion polls, that the monarchy issue and the republic debate is very much in our favour. We still must remain alert and watching for these examples and ensuring that we can very quickly respond.
An organisation should be proactive, and we decided after the Constitutional Education Fund and ACM went our separate ways. The Constitutional Education Fund under Kerry Jones is a fine organisation, but it involves both Republicans and monarchists, and therefore is not really the organisation which can promote the interests, the role and function of the Crown. We decided that we should do this ourselves. We have a separate website. You see the icon from the front page, which sets out the the beginning of the preamble, that the people humbly relying on the blessings of Almighty God, have agreed to unite in one indissoluble federal commonwealth under the Crown. Those moving first words of our preamble to our Constitution Act. And we decided to establish not only a separate site filled with resources for students, which is being looked at in relation to that, particularly I gather at times of research work that students are instructed to do. But in addition, we've established the Neville Bonner Memorial Prize, a national competition, trying to get students involved in this. And I'd like to call Luke Hansis to say a few words on that. There's a video from him on the website, but we couldn't show that. But Luke will have a few words to say to explain what he is doing this year.
This is the video which we have on our site, and you'll be able to see where I had interviewed Luke about the project. And because you can't hear the sound, Luke can speak to it, but you might have a look at the sort of work that ACM is doing in producing video material. And we'll talk a little about the site in a moment, but these are the wonderful little clips that you can see we're producing.
Luke? You've got a mime, Luke.
Okay, essentially the Neville Bonner Memorial Prize is to commemorate our first Indigenous Senator, Neville Bonner, and his aspiration that more Australians would come to know and understand our constitutional monarchy, our system of government, and how it applies to us on a very, very real and fundamental level. It's aimed squarely at years 9 and 10, the students, our next generation, who will one day form the government, hopefully continually under our constitutional monarchy. And it's all about them just understanding how it applies to them personally, and how great it is as opposed to a republic. Because those who say that they're a republic don't understand the consequences that come with saying so. They don't understand that we are quite blessed to be under the Queen. It gives us what's known as direct democracy. It gives us the power and the freedom of speech to be liberated here and to basically put forward the views of the people as opposed to politicians. This year we've actually facilitated it online as opposed to previous years, so that more Australians right across our country can really have the opportunity to say what they believe on a topic that we've presented to them in regards to our constitutional monarchy and what safeguards it actually gives to our three arms of government to ensure that we are technically not overpowered by the politicians and what they want to enforce on the Australians as opposed to what they want to see represented in government. This year it'll be uploaded onto YouTube, and next month I believe we'll be having a national final where first place in each state will come and basically give their pre-prepared speech along with an impromptu. So it'll be great to hear from them when that time comes.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Luke. Thanks, Luke.
Luke is the latest addition to the dynamic ACM team. So if you do get a chance to see him throughout the weekend, introduce yourself, because many of you would not yet have had the opportunity to meet Luke. And he's doing wonderful things with the competition and giving his debut speech. So make sure that you meet him sometime over the weekend. We're in a very different position, ladies and gentlemen, to what we were in 1999. And the landscape of the way that we conduct our campaigns has changed significantly. Where once ACM was very reliant upon the mainstream media to put our views forward, and of course the media thrives on the conflict which would exist in any debate. And so ACM did have a platform from which to put its views, but of course they always put the spin on it to how they want it to be. Well, since the introduction of the internet, and of course the internet existed in 1999, but it certainly wasn't prevalent to the extent that it is today, ACM now has this wonderful tool where we can sidestep the media oligopoly. I'll give you a couple of examples. We've got two websites, and I'll show them to you because we do have some time to do that in a moment. But our primary website, which is norepublic.com.au, is being extremely well received, well visited. We've got 10.5 million hits per year, which is a very impressive figure. It is slightly exaggerated because it talks about a different measure to what most people would understand. But the more realistic measure is 2.3 million page views. That's the number of times people have loaded the page. So we know that there's a significant number of people coming, whichever measure you choose to adopt. We believe that it is the most visited constitutional monarchist site in the world. It's certainly the most active. Professor Flint is on a daily basis, and I'm sure that many of you enjoy his comments, producing comments, posting them to the site, putting out email newsletters, and of course, for those who don't have the internet, we also maintain a semi-regular print newsletter also. We also have our second site, which Luke was talking about, which is our educational resource, and that's also being very well visited, but more on the basis of reference, because the material that's on there is static. And of course, when you have dynamic content coming every day, people are coming back to receive that. So students are visiting it, and they're using it in the capacity of an educational resource. Most, I think impressively, is our presence in the social media. Now, you've probably all heard of Facebook and Twitter and all these things. Well, the one that ACM has focused on is Facebook. And we believe that the best way to reach the young people, because there are exceptions, of course, but by and large, we find that the young people, they're not wanting to come out to conferences, they're not wanting to come out to dinners. Well, I mean, firstly, because dinners are expensive, let's face it, and students don't have necessarily the money to come along, but they are engaging with us on the internet. And for example, on Facebook alone, we have in excess of 34,000 people following every update that ACM puts out. Now, when we put out an update, it comes up in their feed of information. So we know that it's at least being presented to them, and we know that they're engaging with the information as it's being presented, because you can see that people are commenting on it and they're asking questions and putting their input into the debate, and we know that it is an active participation. It's not just a superficial presence. We also know that of those 34,000 people on Facebook, 50% are under the age of 30. And we think that that's very impressive, that we are getting to a significant number of young people that are actively engaged. Twitter, we haven't used extensively, but it is something that we explore peripherally, and all of our updates are put onto there, but it's not being used in the fashion that it could also be used in. So we've taken you, as I said, through ACM's past. We've talked about a few of the significant campaigns over the last 12 months. We now have a special segment, a special treat, that I'll pass over to Professor Flint, who will explain.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the proposed Wagga Wagga Declaration. We thought it appropriate that we should not only, as an assembly, say where we've been, what we've done, but also where we're going, and we thought we would do that. It will be proactive instead of reactive, and that is the idea of this. It affirms, and we'll ask you later on this afternoon at the meeting of the Council, we're going to affirm what we are, what we stand for, but we're also saying that it's time for the Republicans to move on. It's time for them to stop wasting taxpayers' money. We're not saying Republicans privately. We're saying the official Republicans. We're saying the Republicans in Parliament should stop wasting taxpayers' money. There have been 12 major inquiries and votes which have subsidised the Republican case. It's about time that stop. It's also, perhaps even more importantly, why should our politicians be putting up with this distraction? They have their core duties. They have their core duties, for example, concerning such matters as defence and borders and so on, the economy. They only have so much time. And in the 90s, we had so much time wasted on something the people don't want. And they're still trying to do this from time to time. So we say it's time to reverse, to stop this, and I'll hand over to John.
Not only do we want to see that ACM remain active in fighting these moves which already exist of creeping republicanism when something comes up, like removing a portrait from a dining room, or from removing an oath of allegiance where it should be due. What we want to do is now to reverse the improper, and we believe it undemocratic, in the fact that Australians have affirmed that they support entirely our system of government. This is an undemocratic move to remove symbols of the Crown using stealth, or what we call creeping republicanism. It's time to reverse that. So we have a series of calls, and what we're hoping, and we'll certainly learn the outcome of that today, is that this meeting here will adopt what we're calling the Wagga Wagga Declaration, which will take us, using that wonderful name, Wagga Wagga, uniquely Australian, take what has essentially been, and of course there are proactive elements to it, like for example our education project, but by and large ACM has been a reactive organisation. We were formed in a reactive measure to a threat. Well, now we want to become what is a proactive organisation to reverse and make calls to the government to reverse these things. Our first call is to call on the education authorities to teach the truth, and they should talk about the aspects of the Crown which are ingrained in our Constitution. And as our students were saying today, unless a student elects to take a special course of study which goes down that path, they're not being exposed to these issues. I know that I wasn't exposed to these issues. It was only by circumstance that I did become exposed. And I cherish what I've learnt, and I think that most Australians, once young Australians, as they are exposed, and we know this through the educational competition, they're by and large coming to support our system of government.
I was delighted, for example, that one of the young men this morning referred to the rule of law, the rule of law being brought by Governor Phillip to the colony of New South Wales. How often have we heard, and how often has it been written and put into a major book which went round the world, that this colony was a gulag. A gulag is a lawless place. Here you had two convicts, and the students rightly referred to that case, where two convicts sued, the first civil case in this colony, within months of the foundation, in which they sued for the loss of their property. We're calling for the symbols of the Crown to be restored. We're calling for oaths to be honoured and restored where they have been removed. We're calling for respect for the Australian Crown. We're calling for the restoration of royal honours. Royal honours, the Australian system of honours, the Order of Australia was never intended to be an exclusive one-only order. It was always intended that the other orders would continue, and in particular, that those in the gift of Her Majesty would continue. After the knighting of Sir David Smith, there was such a fuss that the message went from the Keating government, or the Hawke government, to the Queen, a request not to give further orders of that nature to Australians. That is outrageous. We have remained a constitutional monarchy. Our Queen should be entitled, if she wishes, to recognise people for their services through knighthoods and being made dame. We're calling for the restoration of Queen's Counsel, improperly taken away in this state by the Fay government and then imitated in other states. There is a move in Queensland to restore this. The Queensland Attorney is behind it. The Queensland Bar wants it. I told our Attorney General that if New South Wales doesn't restore it, what will happen will be that senior lawyers from all over the country will seek recognition in Queensland as Queen's Counsel, and they won't worry too much about being mere seniors counsel. We're calling for the restoration of the highest order of the Order of Australia, which was removed by the Hawke government, that is, Knights of Australia and Dames of Australia. There's no reason why they should not continue. There was a secret instruction by the Keating government to the Governor-General and to the Palace that no more was the royal family to be involved in new patronages of Australian organisations, and no more were royal charters to be granted. That should be reversed. It wasn't reversed by the Howard government. It should be reversed, if not by the present government, perhaps by the next federal government.
You want to keep going?
We're also calling for viceroys to be able to exercise their functions free from political control. If a governor or a governor-general cannot reside in Government House, if they have to have their office in a public ministry, how can they be truly free and impartial? How can they avoid the instructions and attempts to direct them from the government of the day? Obviously, governors need a separate domain. That was always recognised. Bob Carr took it away in New South Wales. It has been restored. It should be restored. It should be continued all over the country. We're calling on the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, the national broadcaster, to do their duty and to behave like a national broadcaster and not put on cheap American comedies at a time when the nation wishes to watch major royal events. We're calling on parliaments to re-examine their constitutional checks and balances, and in particular in the state of Queensland, where, contrary to the wishes of the people expressed in a referendum, the Parliament abolished the Legislative Council. And we do need, in our system of government, significant checks and balances which are consistent with stable government. That was evolved over a period of time, and it's time for governments to look at this again. We see the High Court playing its role in relation to this, exercising more control over the Parliament of the day. And we have a loyal address to Her Majesty, which we established on the internet, which we invited supporters to sign. We're suggesting that this be annexed to the declaration, if you're willing to agree to it this afternoon, and that be part and parcel of the declaration, and that loyal address before the end of this year be sent to Her Majesty with the names of many supporters of Australians for Constitutional Monarchy.
Good. Well, we could take questions.
I should say that the declaration has been circulated. Please look at it and we'll consider it later on this afternoon.